2 Samuel chapter number 15. And I'm reading from the verses 30 and 31. And we will look at another scripture. Are we there? And David went up by the ascent of Mount Olivet and wept as he went up, and had his head covered, and he went barefoot, and all the people that was with him covered every man his head. And they went up weeping as they went up. And one told David, saying, I hid among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray thee, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. Let's go to chapter 17. Chapter 17, verse 14. Chapter 17 of the same book, verse 14. And Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel. For the Lord had appointed to defeat the good counsel of Ahithophel, to the intent that the Lord might bring evil upon Absalom. Look at somebody and say, neighbor. The only antidote to the works of the unrighteous players is a righteous prayer. I'm speaking on the subject unrighteous players versus righteous prayers. I open by indicating that if you look through the entire canon, one of the characters you cannot do away with is David. Indeed and in fact, if you look at the tradition of David in the Bible, one theologian by name Charles has associated David to Moses. And in his opinion, just as Moses is significant within the pages of the Old Testament and the New Testament, so is David also significant. It's interesting because if you look at the Judeo-Christian faith and if you look at the Islamic faith, the three which shares some affinities, all of us have some information or idea or some association to this character by name David. I read some portions of the Quran and I discovered that in the Quran, David is recognized as a king and he's recognized as a prophet. Indeed and in fact, the scholars of the Quran, this is what they say. They say that as his contemporaries were prophesying in the street, he was in the palace prophesying in the palace. If you go into Judaism, he is recognized not only as a king, but even if it is not explicitly stated, you look through the books and you see some portrait of a priest and a prophet revealed in the life of David. It's significant because when Christians read the Bible and read and interpret the Bible, one of the things we discover is that David was not only a king, but David was a prophet and David was a priest. It's important because if you check through the entire Bible, one of the people or the Old Testament character who was anointed thrice was David. And so we can talk about the three offices in the land of Israel. We can talk about the office of the king, we can talk about the office of the priest, and we can talk about the office of the prophet. And if there are three offices in the Old Testament, and if the Old Testament characters were anointed only to occupy a position, then the three different anointing which he received indicates that he occupied the three offices. Give me some sound on the monitor, please. It's significant now because if you look at the life of David, one of the things that we see was that God said that I have found David my servant, and with my holy oil have I anointed him. And it talks about the fact that David had a prophetic word. It's interesting because when I look at the text, all this while, I have always examined the text, and I've always said that it presupposes that there was a search. Because anytime an individual finds something, then it means that the searching was an antecedent or a precursor to finding. You cannot find until you have searched. I realize that in the entire Bible, the word, and that is what it is used, the word is matzah. And when we talk about matzah, it implies that the person who found it searched for it. But my dilemma was the association of the word to God. I would have been satisfied if it was said that Samuel searched and found David. I would have been satisfied if it was said that King Saul or any other person found David. But for the writer to say that God is saying that I have found David my servant causes me to think. And the reason I'm thinking is because if you put the attribute of God within this text, then there seems to be a problem. I don't have a problem searching because I'm not omniscient. I don't have a problem searching because I'm not omnipresent. But if an omnipresent and an omniscient God is searching, then it presupposes that it takes something out of his character. If he is searching, it means that he does not know all things. And if he's looking for it, it means that he is not everywhere at every time. But it means something quite different. So it set me to inquire from scholars, and I realized that oftentimes when the word matzah is used in association with God, it does not necessarily mean that God searched and found David, but rather it means that David was the one who found favor in the sight of God. I don't know if somebody understands where I'm going. Give somebody a high five and say, I have found it. It was not God who found, but it was David who found favor in the sight of the Lord. It's important because if you look at the one whom God sent, it tells us that the word was authentic. God did not send Nathan. God did not send Joel. God did not send Isaiah. God did not send any of the prophet, but God sent a man by name Samuel. For me, the name Samuel rings a bell because at the end of the ministry of Samuel, we are told that none of the words of Samuel fell to the ground. So if God chooses a container whose words does not fall to the ground, it only validates the authenticity of the prophetic word, and it indicates that whatever Samuel was going to declare was something he had heard from the throne room of God. And Samuel himself, the name Shemuel means God hears or God has heard. So when God sends Samuel to declare a word, it indicates that whatever I am telling David is a sure word. And this is serious and very vital because he spoke the word when somebody else was on the throne. But if it is coming from Samuel, it means that But God is saying to David that regardless of whoever is on the throne, once I have said it, I will put you into the place at the right time. The question is when, and the answer is at the right time. Somebody else is on the throne, but once I have declared my intention, it means I'm preparing you for the time and for the place and for the position. So you might see David in the bush, but he is a king only on tour. I don't know whether you understand where I'm going. You might see David in the bush, but the bush is not his permanent station. It's only a temporary station that he is building character and the tenacity to occupy the throne that God has ordained for his life. It is this prophecy, this prophetic word that brings me to divine providence, because whenever God reveals a word by prophecy, there has to be a providential power to regulate the word which he has said, because if God speaks a word and does not monitor the word, then there is no need of speaking the word. I heard him when he said that my word which has been sent forth does not return unto me void until it has accomplished the purpose for which it was sent. I heard him when he authenticated this saying by saying, I am watching over my word to perform. When we talk about divine providence, we are talking about the preservation, we are talking about the care and the government which God exercises over all things in order to accomplish the end for which they were created. And so God watches over and looks over what he has said. But what you need to understand about providence is that God does not only watch over the word for watching sake, but he ordains the processes, he ordains the causes, and he ordains the sequence of causes. You need to understand, because sometimes the sequence might not be pleasant, but in the midst of the unpleasant sequence of event, there is destiny call. I don't know who I'm talking to tonight. You might have been through something which to you is unpleasant, but it's on the master plan and it's part of the process to take you to the place that God has destined for your life. So Joseph might be in chains and the process might not be pleasant, but at the end of the day, it is the chains that will lead him to Potiphar, and it is Potiphar who will lead him to prison, and it is the prison that will lead him to the palace. And if you are in your prison tonight, I came with a sure word from the Lord to tell you that the sequence of events are only taking you to the place that God has ordained for your life. Don't let anybody talk you out of your destiny because of what you have been through, because sometimes God will put the king in the bush, not because he wants to make him a king in the jungle, but to teach him how to stand the tough times and the harder times. Or shake somebody's hand, say, I'm in the bush, but I'm not the king of the jungle. I'm only here to build character and power to be able to go to the place that God has ordained for my life. And so now providence bring the processes. And when we look at the life of David, there were so many processes. He had to stay in the bush for some time. He had to come out of the bush. He had to confront Goliath. He had to leave the battlefield. He had to stay in the house of Saul. He had to get married to the daughter of Saul. And let me propose to you that the marriage to the daughter of Saul was a trap to make
sure that once he wants David, he can use his daughter to be able to lay hands on the life of David. So why would God put me in a place when he knows that that's a trap? Oh my goodness. But the boy has lived in the bush, and in order to know how to live in the palace, you need a daughter of a king. Oh my goodness. To teach you what it means to live in the palace, so that when the appointed time comes, he can put you in that place. You know, sometimes the little breakthroughs are only a test and indicators or indication that we are being prepared and harnessed for our next level. So the little breakthrough you got is only a proof that God is preparing you to be able to take you to the place that he has destined for your life. I want you to know that he endured all these things, but when I look within the page of the text, there is something I find confusing, because when the prophet went to the great man, he never told the man that your kingdom will be taken away from you. When you tell me I have found favor in the sight of the Lord and God is giving me a throne, then the logical conclusion is what God has given to me, nobody else will be able to take it from me. And the question is, why is somebody planning to take the throne away from David? May I suggest to you that whatever God gives to you, I wrote something on Facebook this morning and I said that if God promises you a land flowing with milk and honey, then you need to expect bees, because there is no honey without a bee. So the bees around your life are only indications that you are on your way to the land flowing with milk and with honey. And so now the question one asks is, there is a problem in the text, and the question is, does divine enthronement gives you immunity against demonic dethronement? If God puts you on the throne, does it mean no enemy will fight you? I can judge the quality of your throne by the number of the enemies that fight you, because if it's not a good throne, people will pass by and not even look at it. If it's not a good throne, you can dash it out and nobody will take it. But when I look at your life and all the hell you have been through, it's only a sign that your destiny is more polished than what you see now. And you may not be there yet, but you are on your way to the place that God has destined for your life. Oh, I'm not there yet. It's important now for you to understand that when you look at the text, I see unrighteous players. And when I talk about players, I'm not talking about people who are just playing. But when I talk about players, I'm talking about active participants, because there were people who were active in the plot. And first of all, we have a man by name Absalom, and Absalom was the flesh and blood of David. It's one thing fighting an enemy, and it's another thing fighting an enemy within. And oftentimes the enemy chooses people who are within, so that we can feel the intensity of the pain. And so now we have Absalom, and Absalom had a splendor composition. If you look at Absalom, we are told in the Bible that he had a particular day that his head was shaved. Now when we talk about Absalom, he is what you will call, and if you want to defy the laws of grammar, he is what you will call beauty. Because if you look at the hair that Absalom had, even women at the time were were not fortunate to have that kind of hair. Absalom was so glorious that that David would not love to kill this boy. Can you imagine having a glorious child and now you got to kill your child? And this is why in the heat of the battle he gave a warning that don't you dare touch my son. And so we have Absalom, and another person is Ahithophel. You need to understand the position of Ahithophel. Even though the Bible talks about Solomon, but I'm tempted to believe that the sagacity of Ahithophel exceeded that of Solomon. Now the only reason why we mention the name of Solomon is because of his connection to David and how he ended up in life. But in the case of Ahithophel, he rose against the Lord's anointed. Solomon's wisdom was never compared to God. But in those days, if Ahithophel gives a counsel, when you go to God, that is what God is going to tell you. So he represented divine wisdom. He represented divine sagacity. Whatever he said was as equally as good as what the Lord had said. But one thing was happening at the background, because Ahithophel was related to Bathsheba. And so now you need to understand that he was around when David killed Uriah. He was around when David took Bathsheba. So it implies that all this while Ahithophel was looking for an opportunity to reply and to repay David for the crime he had committed. But to make the argument more intensive, you need to know that the success of David's battles were all contingent on the contributions of Ahithophel. Because in every battle there must be a strategist. There must be somebody somewhere who determines the outcome of the battle, even if he does not fight. This is why whenever we go for a tournament and we come back and the team does not perform, we don't hold the players accountable, but we hold the coach accountable. He never kicked the ball, but by virtue of his wisdom and expertise, he is expected to run the game from the bench. So Ahithophel was the one who helped David to succeed all this while. And can you imagine the point or the background or the pillar of your success rising up against you? Oh, but I came to tell you, it does not matter who rises up against you. It only matters who is for you. And if God be for me, who can be against me? And so now valiant warriors now became vulnerable warriors, and they were worrying all this while. And if somebody should be worrying, and if there is anybody who should be running away, surely I don't expect David. The reason I don't expect David is because when you look at his testimony in the presence of Saul, he told Saul that whenever I go to the bush to watch after my father's sheep, and a lion and a bear show up, I'm able to kill them, and this man will be one of them. He faced lions and he failed the bears, but he killed them without a prayer. He killed them without praying for hours. David, he stood in the face of Goliath and had the audacity, even though he was a little boy. David, he said, he trains my fingers for battle. David, one of the reasons God never allowed him to build was because God said, you have soiled your hands, you have so much blood, you have shed a lot of blood. And the question is, why should a man of such be running away from ordinary Absalom? And the answer is he was not running away from Absalom. He was running away from Ahithophel, because Ahithophel was so powerful that not even the armies of Absalom that matters, but the contribution of Ahithophel. And so now the Bible said he got to a point, and the Bible said he did not know what to do. Here was a king walking in the wilderness and was going barefooted. I read the Psalms, and the Psalms chapter 3, and David said that many are those who say of my soul there is no help, but I like the way he said it. There is no help for me in God. The devil is a liar. Give somebody a high five. Say, I may not have helpers, I may not have helpers, but I have help in the living God. One writer said that man's extremity is God's opportunity. He got to a point that unrighteous players were rising up against him, and the Bible said he did not know what to do, and the only option was to resort to prayer. Ladies and gentlemen, when you get to a place in your life and you don't seem to know how to navigate your way, when you get to a place in your life and you don't know what's next, when you get to a place in all your life and the enemies are all around you, when you get to a place in your life and you don't know when your next time is going to come from, it's not the time to weep, but the time to rise up and to let the devil know, I don't have the capacity, but I know someone who has the capacity. I heard Paul when he said that he is able to do exceedingly abundantly above what we can think or ask or imagine, according to the power that worketh in us. Watch what David did when he got to the point where he had nobody. The Bible said he was told that Ahithophel is with the people. Sometimes in your down moment, you better watch what you hear, because the devil would want to intensify the pain you are feeding, but feeding you with the wrong information. They told David that Ahithophel is with the enemy, and the Bible said when he heard the name of Ahithophel, he did not concentrate on the army, but he said, oh Lord, turn the counsel of Ahithophel. Shake somebody's hand and say, your God knows how to turn the counsel. He said to God that, oh God, turn the counsel of Ahithophel. Ladies and gentlemen, not only did he pray, but he sent Hushaina, and he told Hushaina that I need you to do something. This is what the Bible calls watch and pray, because most of us are praying, but we are not watching. The Bible said he sent Hushaina that go to the camp and pretend to be one. The Bible said when Hushaina went to the camp and Ahithophel had given his counsel, Hushaina said, don't listen to Ahithophel, because if you implement what Ahithophel has said, your father will win the battle. And for the first time, the people of Israel said the counsel of Hushaina is better than the counsel of Ahithophel. Ladies and gentlemen, when the righteous lift his voice and praise, even the counsel of the wicked one can be turned around. I prophesy upon your life, every counsel of Ahithophel, I prophesy upon your life every counsel of the enemy about your throne, every counsel of the enemy about your health, every counsel of the enemy about your marriage, he will turn it around. Ladies and gentlemen, when David, the righteous man, prayed and turned the counsel of Ahithophel, do you know what happened? Ahithophel committed suicide. I prophesy to you, by your prayer, every Ahithophel will commit suicide. I prophesy to you, every prayer you will pray tonight, when the righteous man prays, the enemy kills himself. David never prayed that let Ahithophel die, but Ahithophel died in his own trap. I prophesy to you, because you represent the righteousness of the living God. Every Ahithophel, every conspirator in your father's house, in your mother's house, they will kill themselves. They will kill themselves. They will kill themselves. They will kill themselves. The Bible said when David prayed on the day of battle, on the battlefield, nobody touched Absalom with a sword. It was the tree that killed Absalom. When a righteous man prays, even nature will begin to fight on your behalf. After tonight, when you lift your voice to pray, where there is nobody to fight for you, where there is nobody to speak for you, where there is nobody to say something for you, the Lord that you serve will use nature to fight your enemy. I prophesy to you, may nature fight your enemies. And if you watch through the Bible, you will notice that God used nature. It was in the Red Sea that Pharaoh died. I prophesy to you that may nature fight every unrighteous player who wants your downfall. By the end of this meeting, may they die by fire. May they die by fire. May they die by fire. The greater your amen, the greater your miracle. May they die. May they die by fire. The Bible said when he prayed, nature fought for David, and the throne of David was secured. The enemy wanted David to mourn all the days of his life, but by the power of a righteous prayer, God turned his mourning into a new morning. I say to you, if you are a man and a woman of prayer, God can turn around what you can't do for yourself. Can I talk to somebody? He knows how to turn it around. He turned water into wine. He knows how to turn it around. He turned Haman's position into Mordecai's position. He knows how to turn it around. He turned Vashti's position into Esther's position. He knows how to turn it around. He turned Moses' rod into a swallowing serpent. And I came to tell you that when you pray tonight, everything the enemy planned against your life, I heard the Bible says that effectual fervent prayer of the righteous availeth much. Shake somebody's hand like you hit him and say, my prayer will turn, it will turn, it will turn, it will turn, it will turn it around. What the enemy meant for my evil, it will turn it around. What the enemy meant for my destruction, it will turn it. What the enemy wanted for my death, it will turn. What the enemy wanted for my shame, it will turn. He knows how to turn. And I came here to tell somebody, when you pray tonight, may the sorrows in your life be turned around. The Bible said when God turned the captivity of Zion, we were like them that dreamed. I pray for you that after tonight, when you lift your voice in a righteous prayer. Every unrighteous player who has been planning for your downfall, who has been planning for your destruction, by the power of prayer, by the power of prayer, by the power of prayer, by the power of prayer. I see a turnaround. I see a turnaround. I see a turnaround. I see a turnaround. Don't focus on Ahithophel, but focus on the power that God releases by prayer. Don't focus on Absalom, but focus on prayer. I prophesy to you, may God inject into your system a virus of a prayer life, that everything the enemy plotted will be turned, 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 will be turned. They meant it for evil, but God turned it for his good. They meant it for his death, but God turned it. No wonder the Bible said when Joseph got to the place and the brothers came around, he said to them that you meant it for evil, but God turned it for my good. But God turned it for my good. I prophesy by the end of tonight, it will be turned. It will be turned. It will be turned. It will be turned. Turn it around, Lord. Let the poor man become rich. Turn it around, Lord. Let the single be married. Turn it around, Lord. Let the jobless have a job. Turn it around, Lord. Let the hopeless be hopeful. Turn, 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 turn. Somebody lift your voice and pray.